All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar, the LinkedIn Ads Blueprint, Generating High Quality B2B Leads in 2025. My name is Riley McLaughlin, and I will be your webinar host for today. And I'm also joined by Ryan Cunningham, who will actually be presenting today's webinar. But before I pass it off to Ryan, just some quick housekeeping. So today's webinar is being recorded. So what's going to happen is after the webinar today, tomorrow morning, actually, you'll get an email with a link to the slides and a link to the recording. So you'll have both of those in your inbox tomorrow morning. And we will be doing Q&A during today's webinar. So I'm going to keep a tab on the questions. In fact, you should see a little box, whether you're attending from mobile or a desktop. You should see a little option to type in questions. So if you have a question at any time, just go ahead and put that in the questions box. And then when we get to the Q&A section, I'm just going to run through those questions in order. And with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So take it away, Ryan.
All right, sounds good. Hello, everybody. Let's give you a quick intro of myself. My name is Ryan Cunningham. I'm currently an account manager and LinkedIn and YouTube ad specialist here at Main Street ROI. I have about 12 years marketing experience across B2B and B2C sectors. I founded and operated a successful marketing agency that I ran for about 8 years before coming to Main Street. I specialize in designing high conversion LinkedIn, YouTube ad campaigns for small business owners and enterprise clients. And yeah, I'm passionate about this stuff, especially LinkedIn and YouTube marketing in general. So I will get into it here. So basically, who this is for. This is for small business owners, B2B marketers, agency founders. We're going to cover when and why LinkedIn outperforms other channels. We're going to cover how to build, launch, and optimize message ad campaigns, and then follow up funnel and budget ROI expectations. So why LinkedIn ads? So in LinkedIn, the audience is definitely in a professional mindset. They're ready for business. Roughly 80% of B2B social media leads come from LinkedIn. Precision targeting, that's one thing that makes LinkedIn stand out. You can target by industry, job role, title, company size, seniority, revenue. There's all sorts of options there, as well, of course, of location and basic things such as that. And it also allows for account-based marketing, ABM. So it allows you to upload account lists if you have a nice size email list or customer database to retarget those engaged prospects. Now, why LinkedIn stands out is because it's highly precise B2B marketing with targeted filters, and it drives quality leads. Message ads specifically can deliver decision maker leads for anywhere from $10 to $100 depending on the niche and audience size. That varies. It's going to depend on what your offer is, what your niche is, and how big or small your audience is. Other platforms definitely offer lower CPCs a lot of times, but LinkedIn's professional context, creates higher conversion reliability. And what I mean by that is you can go on Google Ads, you can get cheaper clicks, you can go on Meta Ads, you can get cheaper clicks, but when we're talking about B2B marketing, the targeting just isn't as robust. You can't specifically target those decision makers, so you're relying on interruption marketing and just hoping for the best on Meta many times. And with Google Ads, you're relying on search context, but sometimes the search is mismatched. You might get people that are looking for jobs, other things like that. So it kind of varies there. So even when the CPLs, the cost per lead, reaches a higher cost in niche campaigns, the lead quality justifies the investment for LinkedIn ads. Ad formats overview. So on LinkedIn, there's several ad formats, main ad formats. You've got single image ads, which are more top of the funnel awareness. Average CTR is 0.5%. You've got video ads, which is good for engagement and storytelling, which is roughly the same average CTR as single image ads. Carousel ads, they're mid-funnel education. You can put a lot more information in there, a lot more as far as visuals go. It's going to be roughly the same CTR. Message ads, which is we're going to talk about today. This is direct outreach and leads, roughly a 3% click on send. And then you've got conversation ads. Now these two differ. Message ads, sponsored message ads, are just a simple message ad delivered straight to the inbox of the recipient. Conversation ads give you the option to sort of have a mini funnel inside the LinkedIn messaging, where people can, you've probably seen it before, where people can click different options to answer questions and sort of lead them down a funnel. It's an interactive mini funnel, as it says. You can get a slightly higher form fill rate, just depending on the niche and industry. The only, I'd say if there was a negative to it, the only negative to it is that it is going to be a higher cost, unless you really get dialed in. They're a little more complicated to run and require a lot more testing. There's a lot more variables, but still a great ad choice. So message ads blueprint. So we're talking about message ads specifically today. So how this works is you define your ideal customer profile and you build your audiences, very similar to a lot of other platforms, except on LinkedIn, they have just tons of data, B2B data. Like I said before, job titles, seniority, you can use company list, annual revenue, company size. There's so many options here. It's really robust. If you're in B2B at all, this is definitely the platform to be on, organically and, as far as ads go. Then we go to craft the hook and copy. As a sender of this campaign, how this works is you choose who is going to be the sender for your campaign. It's going to be a real person, a real LinkedIn profile, whether that's you as the owner, CEO, whether that's a salesperson. And it will be their actual profile that they will see their picture. They'll see just their title, more or less, in that little blurb that comes in through a message. Recipients cannot respond to these messages, so just keep that in mind. It's not like you have to man your inbox on LinkedIn to keep responding to these messages. The only action they can take is clicks away from LinkedIn or clicks to open up the LinkedIn form, which is what we're going to talk about in the method that we use. You keep the character count low, you personalize it, and you use value-driven low-key tone, which results in typically a much higher CTR. The offer and call to action, we're just going for a small commitment here. You're not trying to hit them over the head with selling something to them right away. It's very similar in a way to organic outreach or cold email outreach in a way, because you're not going to just immediately hit them with some really salesy offer or some hard sale. It's going to be something like, can I send you our one pager? Would you be interested in talking more about this? Et cetera. So we use in-message lead gen forms, which is on, LinkedIn's own form baked into LinkedIn. The reason being is I've tested this in many different ways. We've sent people to landing pages. It does work. However, it works at a much higher cost usually because you're taking people off platform. And with not just LinkedIn, but a little tidbit of advice, any ad platform, whether that be Meta, Pinterest, you name it, as long as you keep the targeting and the CTA and the form on platform, you're going to get much lower cost. They reward you for that. So I found using and LinkedIn's form is pretty robust. You can ask questions, you can, customize questions, you can get phone numbers, company name, all kinds of information. And most of that, other than the questions, are pre-filled automatically. LinkedIn just pre-fills them. There's less friction. The person just has to hit submit. So follow-up and amplification. This is basically your immediate response is going to be once they opt in. And the way we connect these is we typically use Zapier and connect these lead forms to our CRM. And that's the way it works with clients as well. That's what I suggest with them. And sort of the way this works is they opt in, they will immediately get an email response from you. And you want to make sure you send them, that email thanking them, but also with the promised asset delivery. If it's a call that you're pushing, you will definitely, and even if it's not necessarily a call you're pushing, but you are a business that wants to get people on the phone, and you're still delivering an asset, like a hard asset, digital asset, I still recommend giving them opportunity to book a call with you on your calendar. So make sure you use a Calendly link or TidyCal. You're going to nurture this audience with strategic email sequencing, as you would with any campaign. Content amplification. This is what I call a 1-2 punch. This is something you don't necessarily want to do right out of the get-go unless you have a larger budget. But this is something you can bring into the fold about 2 to 4 weeks later to test. Once you're getting a good response and you know the sponsored messaging is working, you can start targeting the exact same audience with similar messaging, but using either image or video. I highly recommend video if you can, just because it gives a lot more context. And the same audience, then you're going to be hitting many of these people with the 1-2 punch. They're going to be seeing you in their inbox. They're going to be seeing you in their feed. So that tends to work really well. And then audience retargeting, of course, continue to engage with this audience. You can continue to retarget this audience on LinkedIn. In addition to everything else that you see here, the immediate response, the nurture, the amplification. So budget and expectations. This is a question I get asked a lot. So daily starter budget, I highly recommend at a minimum, at least starting out around $30 a day. This gives the opportunity to split test 2 different messages, 2 different subject lines. And that's a bare minimum. If you could do a little more, that's great. If not, $30 works perfectly fine. We've gotten great results with it, and you can scale up from there. Sponsored message ads plus lead gen form, cost per lead. It's going to be, again, I reiterate, higher quality direct engagement leads. So the leads are going to be anywhere, and it does vary wildly, anywhere from $10 to $100, and it really does depend on the industry. I'll get into what the cost per lead we're getting in a little bit, but for some industries, yeah, I'm seeing basically right in that range. It falls squarely in there, and it's going to depend. So remember, these are going to be high value. This is a high value campaign. So if you have something that's only, say you're only offering something that's, $10 product, $20 product or service, or $100 product or service, LinkedIn may not be the right platform. We're talking more like, for instance, if someone wants to sell their business and you're a business broker, or commercial real estate, or just high value clients that are either residual or big one-off projects. And then as far as the image and video ads, similar, but you can't get quite as low of a CPL as you can with the message ads. I've tested every format on LinkedIn, ran many campaigns. The message ads still win in the end. An ROI scenario, let's say you get 20 leads at $50 per lead, and out of that you get 2 to 3 clients at 10 to 15% close rate. That's a win, especially if you have a high value offer. And of course, I put a little note here. Note that B2B sales cycles typically last 3 to 6 months. Plan for 6 to 8 touches. That's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. That can definitely be sped up using some of those options I mentioned a while ago on the previous slide. You can speed that process up, and I know every business and every industry has different sales cycles. So here's a case study. This is actually our own case study. I ran this campaign, and we started with in-feed ads, image ads. Then we moved on to video ads. We tried document, which is a different type of ad where someone can look at a document and opt in right there. So I've tried just about every campaign you can imagine. And when we ran this, we split tested a lot of things. What we found is that the sponsored message ads just hit it out of the park compared to the others. So what we found was, in this one campaign, for instance, over 46,000 sends with a 65% open rate, and which is incredible. Like, normally my benchmark is an open rate of over 40%. So anywhere above 40%, you're hitting it out of the park. If you're just below 40%, you're almost on target. And that's open rate. So meaning they get the message and then they click on it to open it. And then form fill rate, this is also a great number. I mean, anything over 30% is going to be great. We have 42% form fill rate. This just means that after they click and open your message, that they then click the button, the call to action button that opens this form, and they submit that. It's pre-filled in most cases, unless you're asking custom questions, and then they submit that form. So that's what the form fill rate is. Roughly getting a 49-cent cost per open in this campaign. And you got to think about that. Compare that to, say, Google, for instance. Someone searches and they click, depending on what industry you're in, that click could be, $1. That click could be, $50. And that's just a click. So they click, they go to your landing page, and they may or may not convert. They may or may not bounce right away. So, and you also don't know if you have the right decision maker. This is just based on search intent. LinkedIn, the case is, exactly who's getting these messages. These are the decision makers. These are the owners, the CEOs, the project managers. These are the decision makers for these businesses. And we're paying roughly 49 cents for someone to open and look at that message. It's just great. Cost per lead. This, out of all the campaigns that I've ran for clients and for ourselves, this campaign performed the best. For $10.62 per lead. That's not a typo. These are decision makers that have opted in at only just under $11, which is incredible for a B2B lead. So key lesson in this is direct sponsored message ads delivered to key decision makers resulted in a lower cost per open and lower cost per lead. So sample message anatomy. This is just a sample message that we use in this campaign. This blurb right here pre-fills with their name. When it delivers to someone's inbox, it will have their name there. Subject line, very simple. Not a hard sell. Hey, partnership ideas. That's very non-threatening, very personable, just partnership ideas. And then the message itself, hi, let's say Sam. My name is Caitlin, and I manage our marketing agency partnerships at Main Street ROI. I'm reaching out because I've got a few ideas for how we might be able to partner. Can I send over some ideas for you to consider? Please let me know. Thanks, Caitlin. That's it. Keep it simple. We tested longer messages. We tested a little harder sell, a little more direct sell in that message, and it just did not work as well at all. People have short attention spans. You want to keep the message short and concise as possible. So how this breaks down, it's just a personal introduction, establishes the sender as a real person with a clear role, building immediate credibility, value proposition. You suggest a mutual benefit without being sales focused, such as what this message is, and then a micro commitment, just a low friction CTA prompts response without overwhelming the recipient. In our case, we are in this campaign, we were trying to book phone calls. That was the point of this. In other campaigns I've ran, a lot of them have been to get leads and then respond via a call, follow-up call, or follow-up emails. But in this case, we're pushing for an appointment, a call. We have a follow-up sequence for that as well. Okay, so some common pitfalls. Common pitfalls are vague targeting. You always want to map precisely who your ideal customer profile is. You want to know that ahead of time. You want to think about that. Specificity drives quality. So just remember that you want to know exactly who your ideal avatar, customer avatar is. Being too salesy, as I mentioned a while ago, writing peer-to-peer messages, you need to focus on value, not hard selling. This is a first touch in many cases, so you don't want to come off with a hard sell. And then not having a follow-up process. You got to plan your nurture sequence before you launch, prepare all your content assets, have them set up and have them tested. Make sure that your Zapier connection is working. Make sure that your email response is going out and it's triggered. Do all your checks and balances, make sure that's working. Make sure you've got a follow-up process, automated process loaded up and ready to go. Ignoring analytics. This is something else. Sometimes companies will launch campaigns. They think they have their targeting dialed in. They don't really look at their analytics other than to look at, this is our cost per lead, this is our CTR, etc. you need to dive deeper. You need to start looking, and you have to get enough data for this, of course. I would say once you hit roughly 3,000 in spend, really preferably even higher, 5,000. But once you hit at least 3,000, you can start looking at the response you're getting by job title and industry, and you can start to look at which segments are converting the best. Not necessarily to optimize it at that point yet, but you can at least start having an idea of what's happening. And that can help you refine not only your targeting, optimizing your targeting by maybe excluding an audience based on industry or job title, but also the messaging in general. It may help you refine your messaging that will, resonate even better, moving forward. And skipping A/B tests. This is something else I see a lot. Companies will launch with just one campaign and, one ad, and they say, well, this doesn't work, or maybe it's working okay, but it could work better. They don't know because they only have the one campaign going. So I suggest always at least split test two creatives, two ad copies, headlines, the CTAs, the copy length. Small changes do drive big results. Another thing you can test, but I don't necessarily, unless you have a larger budget, if you're starting at the $30 a day, I would not do this, but if you do have a larger budget, you can split test the forums as well. And you'll find some nuance there as also. You'll find that some forums perform better than others. It's, depending on what the headline is of that forum, the call to action, and the subtext beneath it. Oops. So how to get started? Again, plan, define your ideal customer profile, build audience lists, craft messaging. So you may have an audience list already. If you do, that's an excellent place to start. Whether this is a list that you procured, whether this is your own list, whether it's an email list. The one thing I will caveat here is the audience has to be big enough. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have a 10,000 person list that, okay, great, I got a 10,000 person target when I go to make this campaign. That doesn't mean that. What LinkedIn's going to do is start matching to see, match your data compared to what LinkedIn has to see if that list matches up with what LinkedIn has. And typically you're going to end up with a list much smaller than that, or maybe half that, or maybe 3/4 of that. It just depends if they can match it up. And of course, craft your messaging. And I suggest right out of the get-go, when you do this, instead of just crafting the split test 1 and 2, go ahead and just, while you're on it and you're doing it and you're in the moment, do about 6, 7, different subject lines, different messaging, a few different forms just to have those ready in the hopper. And for later on, have those all ready. Pick 2 to start with and go with those 2 for split test. Then you want to launch your campaign, set up your campaign, create the lead forms, and prepare the follow-up. And prepare to follow up. Optimize, you'll analyze your results, you'll refine targeting, and test new messages. Again, why I suggest doing this all in the beginning instead of scrambling and trying to come up with new messaging. You have a lot of messaging already prepared in your arsenal, so to speak, and you can easily, quickly deploy some new messaging to split test. And then as time goes on and you refine your targeting and you start looking at this, that will also help you refine. You may find that a particular industry is responding more than the others. And if that audience is large enough to run a campaign, you could speak directly just to that industry. If you're fortunate enough to only be targeting one industry and that's the industry target, you don't have to worry about it. But if you target various industries, this is where this will help you define things, and you can set up a separate campaign that speaks with, a language that resonates with them specifically. So there's 2 options, obviously, self-service, do it yourself, or done for you or done with you, which is a free campaign audit and strategy call. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So, what we have and what we do and what we're offering is essentially a free 30-minute, no pressure LinkedIn ads consultation. This is something where you can get on the phone with me personally. We can talk about your business, your goals, your target audience. I can do some high-level research. I can help look and see if your audience is in fact on LinkedIn, which if you're B2B, most likely they're going to be 99% of the time, and what sort of options you have for your targeting. Because that's one of those things where, yes, if you're B2B, you can say that LinkedIn works no matter what, sure. But at the same time, it really does depend, because I've ran across some clients that have really tight targeting, really unique situation. They're only looking for, to reach engineers in a specific industry or in a specific state, and they just keep layering this on, and then you end up with an audience of only like 1,000 people or something. So it's tough to run a campaign like that. You typically have to have at least 1,000, but I'd recommend at least 5K or more. Ideal audience size is going to be, 30 to 60,000. You can be larger than that, of course, but I would say that's a good audience size for these sponsored messages. So yeah, that's essentially what we have, is that we can offer you a customized strategy session, custom targeting recommendations, and can help you, learn how to optimize your budget strategies. So now I want to open the floor for questions. If anyone has any specific questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. If you have any questions like targeting strategies for your industry, message ad copy, customization, budget allocation across different ad formats, campaign measurement and optimization, and integration with your existing marketing stack. Any sort of questions you have, feel free to ask away.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ryan. Yeah, so now is the time where we will take questions. So if you have a question, just go ahead and put that in the chat, and we'll run through those. So Ryan, one of the things that you had mentioned was being specific targeting. So can you elaborate a little bit more on just how specific the targeting can get on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Normally, obviously the place to start is, do you have a geolocation? Are you specifically targeting a certain state, region, the entire country, the entire world? That's where you start, first of all. That's the first layer. From there, you move down to, there's a lot of ways to do this, but normally what I do is then go to job titles, go to job industries, if there's specific industries that you want to go after. And that could be one, it could be many. We go there next. Then we go to job titles. And typically there's going to be a set number of titles that work for just about every campaign: co-owner, owner, founder, co-founder, president, vice president. There's a lot of, there's that, but then some industries I know, and some niches, you may want to reach out to, like project managers, for instance, or something like that. So we can add those in there. Once you get to that point, you can then also say, okay, I only want to target companies that are over a certain annual revenue. I don't want to target companies that are under $1 million a year revenue. I only want to target over 100 million in revenue per year companies, these decision makers. This is amazing because, I mean, if you think about it, obviously you're going to be able to go for the type of company with the type of revenue that's got the budget that can afford what you have to offer. Company size is another one too. So you can also, filter this down to company size and layer that in as well. So what that means is LinkedIn has options. There's myself only, there's 2 to 10 employees, there's 10 to 500, and it sort of just keeps going up and up. You can include or exclude whatever you want there as well. And then if there's anything, the last thing I do is, if there is anything that you definitely want to exclude, that you want to do it there as well. So say that you've got all this targeting dialed in, but you're like, but I definitely do not want to reach out to engineers, or I definitely do not want to, you can exclude some of these things just to be absolutely sure. LinkedIn does do a good job. So whoever you're saying you want to target is going to target. But when you start looking at your analytics, you will find some overlap. You'll find that you may only be targeting, presidents of companies, but you may see that some of these people are co-owners, or you may see that some are managers. So you will have some overlap. So if you're definite on something like that, or industries you want to exclude, like, the common is exclude adult industries, or liquor, things like that. I mean, you can exclude those as well.
Cool. And looks like we got a question from Gordon. So, are going after meeting planners too niche for a resort to book small meetings and retreats?
Would it be the entire United States or a specific state or region?
I assume a specific region, but if that's not true, Gordon, if you can elaborate a little bit. So if it was just a unique region,
Yeah.
what would you say?
If it's really niche like that and it's just planners and it's a specific state or region, it would be really tough to probably build a big enough audience size to run a campaign. It's one of those things that I would just have to look at and research and see. But if you were targeting, the entire US, for instance, this is a good example. Have a client who wants to target solar companies, whether they do solar panels or batteries or installs. Originally they said we're only going to target these two states. I mean, yeah, California was one of them. It's a big state. I think Washington was another one. But the issue with that is when you think, well, those are huge states, but the problem is you're only going after certain decision makers in these companies. The audience wouldn't be quite big enough for that. In most cases, sometimes it is, but a lot of times it isn't. So when they opened it up broadly to the entire U.S., then yes, that changed the game, and we had definitely enough audience to play with there. So that's kind of an example of how that would play out.
Cool. And typically, how much time can someone expect to be running ads before they're getting results? Because I know that's a common question that we get.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and a good question. I hate to say this all the time. It varies. I do say it a lot, but it is just like that in marketing. It really does vary. I've seen on average, I surprisingly I've seen clients get results within the first month. There may not be a ton of results, there may not be a ton of leads that first month, but I have seen at least one or two leads come in the first month. You start getting to month 2 and 3, that's when things will pick up. And it's again going to depend on industry, but also depend on budget. The more budget, the quicker data comes in, the quicker you find out if something's resonating, the quicker you get more leads. Smaller budgets, that just means it's going to be stretched out longer over a longer period of time. And this is the same concept with Google Ads or Meta Ads as well. It's going to be stretched out over a longer period of time. It's going to take longer to get that data in. But even with smaller budgets of even the $30 a day or sometimes even a little less, yes, I've seen leads come in, within the first month, and a lot of times good leads that the companies have, turned into clients and closed business on.
Cool. It looks like we got a question from Valerie. What business categories tend to perform best using LinkedIn ads? And what about a nonprofit promoting a fundraiser and looking for donations? And would you refresh me on the average daily budget / campaign length? I know
Okay,
that's
so sorry.
faceted.
Go
So
ahead.
yeah, I know it's multifaceted question. If you need me to repeat that, just let me know.
Okay, so yeah, just the first part of it, that which industries typically perform best. Um, it runs the gamut. Granted, I can't say that I've unequivocally ran campaigns targeting every single industry, across the board that LinkedIn has to offer, but um, it's not as much so much industry as it is the titles of the people who you're targeting is what I find. So, you find, obviously you're going to find, VPs or presidents. You might think, well, they're the top of the food chain. They're going to be the ones that are going to make these decisions. They will be the ones that convert. But if it's a bigger company, it's not necessarily going to be the case. It's going to be someone further down the ladder, C-suite, further down the ladder. But I find that it's not so much industries. Other than this, I will tell you this. We did, and I have attempted to target more blue collar industries, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, trades, construction, even commercial construction. What I found there was those did not perform quite as well. As you can imagine, those people really aren't on LinkedIn a lot. Blue collar workers, even owners, even if it's a big company of some of these blue collar type companies, Some are on there, some are not, but it's not like it is when you're targeting white collar. So there is a difference there. So I will say that those industries definitely don't perform as well as anything else. I would say anytime you're looking at, the attorneys or accounting or, manufacturing, any of those type of things work well. I've seen, things work great for manufacturing, getting in touch with certain job titles there. So really the only thing I'll say there is the ones that don't perform as well are going to be the more blue collar industries. And what was the second part of that, Riley?
Yeah. What about a nonprofit promoting a fundraiser and looking for donations?
Yeah, I have worked on a campaign like that as well. Again, that's going to come down to who your ideal target is and who we're talking about here. Is this the case where we would just be targeting, anyone and everyone for this, or is this a case where this is typically resonates with a specific industry or title of person? I imagine if it's for donations, the title wouldn't necessarily matter at so much unless it's very specific. But I guess the industries, I don't know if that's a tight targeting there that we need to think about, but yeah, I have run campaigns like that for nonprofits as well, and it's worked well. So remember, LinkedIn typically is not going to be, it's not like a B2C, funnel. It's not where you're going to say, reach out to these people in a sponsored message, click here to make a donation. It's not going to be that sort of thing. If you're talking about higher value clients that could possibly give you bigger donations, yes, this is more in the realm of LinkedIn marketing and ads, to just get a conversation started with them. Again, as long as the messaging to them is not, hey, would you like to donate to me? That's very vanilla and it's just, and salesy and stuff. But if it's more based off of something they might have a common interest in that your charity or your nonprofit is about, do you care, something about sea turtles or you name it. If it's something that you can find common ground with, and that's where your niche lies, that you can connect with them on without asking for anything necessarily big right off the bat. Just, hey, would you be interested in having a conversation about this? Or would you be interested in getting this digital delivery, more or less a lead magnet sent to you to give you more information about this and learning more about it. As long as it's not so upfront and salesy, it can work really well. And what was the other part of that, Riley?
Yeah, last part is, and would you refresh me on the average daily budget / campaign length?
Yeah, average daily budget is, I would say, at a minimum $30 per day. You can squeak by with a little less than that if you wanted to test it, but I wouldn't go much less than, say, $20 a day. But $30 really, I typically say, is the minimum. And then campaign length. When you launch any campaign on any platform, my guideline here and the goalpost is always the same: 3 months. I always say no matter what you're doing, give it 3 months, even if it's organic. No matter what you're doing, give it 3 months. Stay consistent, optimize your campaigns and, track them and be in there daily and weekly, looking at what's happening. And refine your messaging. And typically what I say on campaign length before you start doing that, I know it's not so much based on time as it is budget spent, because it's how you get the data in. It's based on how much you've spent on those ads. So I would say normally, which kind of fits with the $30 a day, is, by month 3, you're going to know, one, is this working at all? 2, in what way is this working the best? And you make a decision from there. 3, your targeting, is it on point? Am I targeting the right people? Are there certain people that aren't really responding we can just exclude? And then, go from there. That, your messaging, it's resonating or it's not resonating, or this message resonated. And the way I look at this is like a boxing match. When you do these split tests, you're putting one contender against the other. You'll have a champ after, say sometimes even a month and a half, you'll have a champ, and then you'll have the loser. Take the loser out, put a new contender in, put them up against each other, and see what happens. And you may have the same champ, or you may have a new champ. So that's sort of the way I look at that. It's, with marketing, it's always be testing and always be optimizing to get the best results.
Cool. And we got another question. I believe you already covered this, but curious, what type of creative performs best? Videos, static ads?
Most definitely message ads, the sponsored message ads. If you're talking about in feed specifically and you're excluding message ads, video ads typically perform the best, just because you're giving the prospect more context, and it's easier to consume information via video. The only recommendation there is, I'd always say, as a video editor also, I would say, have subtitles in there. Don't put a super long video on there. Keep it punchy and to the point. Try to stick to under a minute, and go from there. Now, I will say we did actually test the Max on LinkedIn with a video ad, and it was essentially a mini webinar presentation. I condensed down an hour-long webinar to, I think LinkedIn's limit's 15 minutes, and condensed it down to 15 minutes. And that's actually even another approach you can take if you have a webinar, if you have a presentation, and it's pretty solid. You can do that, because you've got to think about it this way. If you typically run an ad campaign to get people to click to go to a landing page, which then when they get to the landing page, they're going to give information to get to the webinar that you're wanting them to sign up for, then they have to show up for that webinar. So think of all the variables there and how much friction there is. This was kind of neat because we basically condensed that webinar down to under 15 minutes, put it right in the feed, targeted our list with that. And you can see when you're looking at these video ads, you can see the completion rates. And what was amazing was to see that we were getting X number of completions. I don't remember the exact, since it's focused on sponsored messaging, I don't have that data with me right now, but we were getting X number of completions for a very, very low cost. Sometimes you get clicks too, of course, but the whole point of it was to get them to watch it. That's why you were originally wanting them to come to your webinar anyway, is to watch the webinar. So to get them to watch it right there in their feed, it's just amazing. It was just, when you think about the whole sales cycle, the whole funnel to get someone from point A to point B to get to that presentation, the cost involved in that versus the cost that it was just to have them watch that condensed version right on LinkedIn, it was like apples and oranges. So yeah, I mean, that's something you can do too. But yeah, overall, I've tested everything. Sponsored message ads are the best in most cases, and you're going to get the lowest CPL, the lowest cost per action, which is going to be those message opens for 49 cents, or on average, at least for us, and for other industries, it's anywhere from 30 to 60 cents. So it's somewhere in the middle there. And you're also, like I said, it's just, you're getting those decision makers to look at that. So in the feed, there's all kinds of stuff in a feed on LinkedIn. There's all kinds of distractions. They may hover there for a minute. They may actually look at it, but they're going to, it's going to be easier for them to bounce because there's so much going on. When they get a direct message in their inbox, it's more focused, it's punchy, it's to the point. But what I recommend ultimately is, if you do have the budget, using both sponsored message and an in-feed video ad targeting the same exact audience. That tends to work well, because then you're making 2 touch points in 2 different ways. They're getting the sponsored message from you, they're seeing the in-feed video, they're getting to like, know, and trust you more quicker, and it's moving the sales cycle up faster.
All right, we got a question from Phyllis. Does LinkedIn work for local service companies with a physical address?
You said local service companies with a physical address?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you ask. We actually do have a newer client that's been with us for a couple months, and so far, and they are a very large electrical company that basically does a lot of EV charging stations out west and does backup generators, but they also do general electrical service as well. And it's a pretty big company, and they have a lot of technicians, but they've been around for a long time. So we, in the message copy, I definitely keyed in, and they're targeting a specific area, of course, of their state. So I really keyed in when you are targeting a specific area in that message, you most definitely want to mention that somewhere in that message, like, we are, we've been in servicing Indianapolis for the last 50 years, or, something like that, to make sure immediately you're connecting with them because you're targeting them and they're from your same area and that's who you want. You want to make sure you essentially name drop the city in there, the town, the city, the whatever. You want to name drop that. And it's also good, especially in the case of a service business, to throw in there in the messaging somehow that how long you've been in business. Those two things in combination, and that's what we're doing for this electrical company, and they've been getting leads, and one of them is turning out to be a pretty big client. That's a property management company that has a lot of different apartment complexes and different things. So yeah, it's working well for them so far. So like I said, it's only the campaign, I think we're at 2.5 months at this point, but that has been my my first real experience running a campaign for a service-based business like that that's targeting a specific geolocation. But so far at 2.5 months, yes, they're definitely getting leads, and they did close a fairly substantial client.
Sweet. And it looks like actually, Ryan, we got through all of the questions.
Okay.
Cool. So yeah, if you do have a last, one last burning question, give it another 20 or 30 seconds or so, just in case anyone's typing. But yeah, just put that in the chat. And let's see. Looks like we got something. There's a question from Gordon. Let me see if I can. Oh, this is so this is going back to the first question, Ryan, about meeting planners. So I think it was are going after meeting planners too niche for a resort to book small meetings and retreats. And then he later said, we have an association for hotel owners, but they aren't allowed on LinkedIn as many are doctors, lawyers, developers, etc. So their profile may not say hotel owner. Um, not many titles as hotel owner.
Okay. I think I understand that. So yeah, so in other words, it's ambiguous that you wouldn't necessarily be able to, it wouldn't be in their profile that they actually are a hotel owner, and that's who you're wanting to target. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to.
Okay. Yeah, that would make it tough, just because you can only go with the data that you can access. And if LinkedIn doesn't have the data, we wouldn't be able to target them. You could definitely target by industry. And I do believe accommodations, hotel accommodations, I believe is on there as a listed industry. And it's something you could target. Now, you can also layer that if you only want, of course, owners, co-owners, presidents, vice presidents. You can definitely do that. And if you're targeting the entire US or even the world, you're going to, of course, have a large enough audience that you could access. But if it's only like you're only wanting to target people, for instance, that own hotels in California, even though California is massive, that would be the best chance, state, or Texas or Florida have the best chance of having enough audience to do that with. It'd probably still be tough to pull together enough audience for that, even in that case. So as long as it was the entire United States, you could layer it in such a way to reach that industry and then those higher up decision makers.
All right, and then Phyllis is asking, how does she sign up for a consult?
You can just reach out. Riley, I know you're going to send these the webinar presentation to everyone. So I guess if I'll let you answer that. If she wants to go ahead and I can tell you this, the first week we're going to be doing, I'm actually going to be out of the office, luckily on vacation here very, very shortly, for, I don't know, for roughly a little over a week. So the week of July 8th, I will be available, and any time after that. So from roughly July 8th on, Monday through Friday, I'd be available for the consultation.
Yeah, so in the email, and the follow-up email that will be sent out tomorrow, in addition to links to the recording and the slides, there's going to be a third link for booking that consult. So yeah, you can book with Ryan directly, and like he said, it's going to happen not next week, but the following week. Cool. Well, it looks like that is it for questions. If you didn't get your question answered, just go ahead and reply to the email that you get tomorrow, and we'll make sure that we get that answered for you. And yeah, with that, I think we can close. So thanks, Ryan, for the awesome presentation, and thanks everyone who attended.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.